After the Allies had won World War I, from the period spanning from January 1919 to January 1920, the Paris Peace Conferences took place in Paris, in France. And in these peace conferences, the Allied victors of the war basically set out and drafted the terms of the treaties that would shape Europe in the 1920s and the 1930s. The most famous one out of all of these was the one that dealt with Germany, the Treaty of Versailles. And in these peace conferences, the main three powers, called the Big Three, that reigned supreme was Woodrow Wilson from the USA, Clemenceau from France, and Lloyd George from Britain. So in this video, I'll be outlining their different goals and what they wanted from the Treaty of Versailles. So an easy way of assessing each of the Big Three stances on Germany is to look at it as a spectrum, from most lenient to least lenient. Clemenceau stands right on the least lenient side of the spectrum. He wanted Germany to be punished the most harshly. Whereas Wilson is right on the other end. He was very idealistic and he wanted Germany not to be punished too harshly for losing the war. And right in the middle, we have David Lloyd George, who took a more moderate central stance. Each of these stances not only show and are a reflection of how their countries were treated in the war, but also work to shape the terms and the ambitions that each of these Big Three had in the Paris Peace Conferences, especially when dealing with Germany. So firstly, Clemenceau. As I mentioned, France took the most harsh approach. They wanted Germany to be treated the worst in the Treaty of Versailles. In fact, Clemenceau had the nickname the Tiger in the Paris Peace Conferences because he demanded revenge and a very harsh treatment of Germany. And while this makes sense, France was the one that had suffered the most from the war, with over 750,000 homes destroyed, since a lot of the fighting took place on the western border and France suffered large infrastructural losses, as well as 1.5 million soldiers killed, with many more civilian deaths. The public wanted revenge. So it follows that Clemenceau's aims when establishing the Treaty of Versailles was to completely crush Germany, as at the time of the peace conferences, Germany had actually invaded France twice in 50 years. Clemenceau's territorial demands for Germany were very harsh. He wanted her to lose all her colonies and for them to be divided up among the victors. He wanted to gain control of the Saar, an area rich in coal and steel. And control of the Saar would not only have worked to severely weaken the German economy, but it also would have helped to rebuild France after the mass destruction. Other territories they wanted Alsace-Lorraine back, which was stolen from France in 1870 in the Franco-Prussian War. And in addition, they wanted the Rhineland, the industrialized area that bordered between Germany and France, to be completely an independent state in order to act as a cushion, as a barrier between Germany and France. He wanted Germany to be completely dismantled and broken up altogether. In line with this are his reparation demands. He wants reparations to be set extremely high, again, not only to cripple the German economy, but to help rebuild France and pay war debts to the USA, which were extremely high. Clemenceau wanted the German army to be completely dismantled so they could never harm France again. And that's a common theme we noticed in a lot of the demands that Clemenceau has, is that he wants security and stability for France from what they believe is an aggressive, threatening, and overly militaristic and aggressive Germany. Okay, now on to the completely opposite end of this spectrum. Woodrow Wilson from the USA, who was nicknamed the good man from the New World in the Paris Peace Conferences because he was very idealistic and didn't want Germany to be treated harshly. He mainly sought to create a new world order based on his 14 points to ensure a just and a lasting peace for the world. And again, this reflects how his country was treated in the war. America only joined the war in 1916 and had not suffered nearly as much as France or the UK had suffered. So Wilson's demands when going into the Treaty of Versailles are not, contrary to France, to punish Germany, but rather to create a just and a lasting peace. And as I mentioned before, he wanted this to be based on his 14 points. Basically a set of, 14 points that he wanted countries of the world to follow, that he thought was necessary to maintain global order and global peace. Some of them are freedom of the seas, freedom of trade, self-determination for the peoples of Eastern Europe. And basically what this meant was for in the areas of Eastern Europe where big empires had collapsed, such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, he wanted these power vacuums to be filled by independent nations who were finally able to decide their own borders. Through plebiscites, he wanted independent states and different ethnicities to be formed. His main and final 14th point was the creation of a League of Nations, which was basically meant to be a peacekeeping organization that ensured that global order was maintained and prevented the outbreak of another major conflict. Reparations should be minimal, and according to another one of his 14 points, he wanted not only Germany to disarm, but he wanted all countries to collectively disarm in order to ensure, again, global peace. However, interestingly, the USA actually never joins the League of Nations, despite it being pushed by the American president himself, Wilson, because the American public actually demanded isolationism, which means they did not want to get involved with any of Europe's affairs. Okay, and lastly, David Lloyd George, who stood right in the middle of these two opposite ends and extreme. He was the British foreign minister, and he had a very pragmatic approach. While Britain had suffered quite substantial losses from the war, they had very high war debt, the British economy suffered a lot, and mostly the public demanded to hang the Kaiser or hang the German leader. Because 1 million British soldiers had been killed, David Lloyd George is very pragmatic. He knows that he has to punish Germany. However, he also knows that not to punish her too severely in a way that would drag down all of Europe's economy after a costly war. This meant setting up reparations that were not too high in order not to weaken the German economy too much, but rather keep it as a stable trading partner and allow it not to fall into the hands of communism. In terms of territorial demands, David Lloyd George wanted all of the ex-German colonies to be divided among the victors. Mainly, he wanted control. Him and France wanted the control of her colonies. However, he opposed France when Clemenceau wanted to smash Germany to pieces, because he thought, again, this would be too harsh on Germany and would cause national resentment. In terms of disarmament, the British did want Germany to reduce the size of her army. However, they did not want her to reduce it to such a point that she was unable to defend herself against France, which would help to maintain the balance of power in Europe, which is something Lloyd George wanted to maintain. However, a specific term they did have in terms of German disarmament is that they wanted the German Navy to be greatly weakened. Because in the years leading up to World War I, and especially during World War I, Germany and the UK went through a naval arms race. The German Navy grew to a point that it threatened the British supremacy over the seas. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you found it useful. In my description, I'll have additional links, and if there's any topic you want me to make a video on, please comment about down below and I will do so.